Hospitalized and Teleportation, an LSD and mushrooms trip report, posted by Annan to Erowid.org, February 8th, 2013. Age 19. Date October 10th, 2011. Dose 7 grams of mushrooms and 4 hits of LSD. I'd done LSD twice prior to this experience, and mushrooms 3 times. I'd also tripped quite a lot on 2CE, as well as salvia, and considered myself moderately experienced with psychedelics. I had never tripped very deep, even with up to 75 milligrams of 2CE. I was very eager to get a really deep, meaningful experience. I'd heard that tripping alone would allow your mind to really let go, to not have someone there with you to ground you in reality. Well, from my experience, that's completely true. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and I'd just bought 7 grams of mushrooms and 4 hits of LSD from a friend. I don't really know why I decided to trip that night. It was one of the worst times I could have done it, being the day before Thanksgiving with lots of stuff to do the next day with family. I initially was only going to do it at 9 PM, but I kept putting it off and telling myself, it's not a good time, just wait till next week. But by 11 PM, I decided, fuck it, and took my 7 grams of mushrooms and ground them into a powder. I used them to brew a mushroom tea. I then flavoured it with orange juice and sugar, and it tasted pretty good. Whilst I was drinking my brew, I took the 4 hits of LSD. Within 15 minutes I could feel my stomach twisting and turning, bubbling on the inside. The mushrooms were at work alright, and at the 30-minute mark I could see the classic mushroom visuals. I looked at my cement floor, a liquid texture, a lot like a bowl of soup. I had never seen visuals this loose before. I shook my head and the world jiggled like a bowl of jello. I spent the next 15 minutes looking at items around my room and shaking my head. I decided to put on some psytrance to get myself in the right mindset. At the 45-minute mark, it was only getting more intense. My visuals had taken on a pink and purple hue. I turned off the lights because it was starting to bother me. The colours weren't as noticeable in the dark, but I found it almost impossible to see anything but my TV or computer screen. My vision was polluted with a fuzzy texture, much like that of static on a TV. I spent the next 10 minutes or so trying to get comfortable and fighting the worsening stomach pains. At about an hour in, it felt like the LSD was finally starting to take effect. My trip briefly took on a much lighter, happier feeling. I turned the lights back on and decided to play my guitar. I felt like I was playing some really beautiful stuff, but it was probably just the drugs. This whole time I was still trying to fight the stomach pains, but they were just getting worse and worse. When, finally, I had had enough, and had to run for a bucket I kept just in case something like this happened. I puked 3 or 4 times, but it was strange. Usually when I puke it's very watery, a large amount, and I won't puke more than once. But this was different. I was puking up very small amounts and it was all grey mush. It kind of weirded me out because I just drank that tea, so why wasn't any water coming out? This sent me into a bad mindset, like something was wrong with me. I stumbled over to my bed to lay down and tried to feel better, but I noticed that everything, and I mean everything, was moving. Usually when I trip, I'll see things move or scurry along in the corner of my eyes, but this stuff was happening right in the centre of my vision. I didn't like that at all. It's like my trip intensified 10 times after I'd puked. I got into bed with colours flying all over the walls. I felt things crawling up my legs, but reasoned with myself that it was just my sheets. I tried to keep calm and ride it out, telling myself that fighting it will only make things worse. I knew I was in this for at least 6 hours, so I tried my best to bring myself back to a happy place, but it wasn't working. All I could think about is, what have you done to yourself? Why did you do this the night before Thanksgiving? What kind of a drugged out loser does this kind of shit to themselves? It was just an endless cycle of thoughts like that. I jump out of bed and run to my computer. I go to Google and type in how to stop an LSD trip, please help me. I can't even read the words on the screen. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was because I was in such a panic at the time, but I have no clue. It just made no sense to me why I couldn't read simple English words. I'd been able to read them my whole life, and now all of a sudden, I'm no longer literate. At this point, I genuinely thought I'd lost my mind. I was convinced I'd gone too far and had permanently wrecked my mind of the drugs I had taken. My mind then filled with the voices of my friends and family saying things like, "I told you this would happen. Why would you do this, you idiot? You're fucked now." I began to picture myself in a mental institution, locked away from all of society. My name and face was in the paper with the headline, "Local teen perma-fried." I tried my best to keep my mind off this topic, telling myself everything will be fine, that it's just a drug, and when it wears off I'll be back to normal. But in the back of my mind, I knew I was lying to myself. I spent what felt like hours trying to calm down. I browsed my favourite sites, Justin.tv and YouTube, and then opened up a stream on Justin.tv and saw a guy playing some sort of really fucked up computer game. Everyone was half naked and having sex, and there were random things bouncing around. It was nothing that looked familiar to me, and this really freaked me out, because I didn't know if this was real or if I was just imagining it. I looked at the stream's chat and everybody was extremely negative, saying things like, "Go kill yourself, faggot." This really got to me. I kept picturing myself slitting my arms and chopping off my fingers, and I just could not get it out of my head. I was really worried I would actually do the stuff I was thinking. So much so, I had to go grab a pen and paper and write down, "Do not hurt yourself." It seemed to help, so I stuck it in front of my screen so that I couldn't look away from it. I went back to looking up how to stop my trip, even though I knew there was nothing I could realistically do about it. I guess I got some sort of comfort out of trying. My thoughts only got worse and worse. I was still convinced I had lost my mind, that there was no coming back from it, and that it was not safe for me to be alone, as I might hurt myself for whatever reason. I was pacing back and forth in my room for at least 15 minutes just talking to myself. I looked at my clock, and it was only 12:45 AM. This blew my fucking mind, because I thought it would be at least 3 AM. This really discouraged me. I knew I was going to be tripping for a very long time, and if it was going this slow, it was going to be a nightmare for sure. The same process repeated itself. Me thinking I'd lost my mind, pacing in my room, telling myself I'd be okay, but actually thinking the complete opposite of that. It was now 1:30 AM, and I had had enough of this. I decided my only option was to go outside. My reasoning was that nature would calm me down. I'd be okay once I was away from my room. In my state, I couldn't really feel my body all that well. I was constantly on tippy toes and flexing my muscles. The very idea of going outside and being okay sparked something in my mind, and aside to feel better, no, I felt amazing in fact. I was in a godlike state now. I was untouchable. I sprinted upstairs barefoot and in pyjama pants. I decided to leave my shoes because I simply didn't need such things. Why would someone who is untouchable need a shoes to protect their feet or a jacket to keep them warm? In my mind, I pictured mountain lions ripping at my flesh, me laying on the ground unaffected, immortal. I felt such a rush of power, like nothing I'd ever felt before. Something stimulants and other drugs simply couldn't even touch. I wrote a letter to my family telling them exactly what I had taken and what had happened. I told them I would leave them in peace for Thanksgiving, and that I was sorry I had done this. My plan was to leave the house and go somewhere for 24 hours to see if I'd lost my mind or not. If I did, I would live the rest of my life in isolation. I know how stupid that is, but that's honestly what I thought my options were at the time. I got outside. It was dark, but I could see just fine. Colours filled my vision. I live in a quiet little neighbourhood, mostly older couples with very young children. There's a railroad behind my house that passes through a forested area. I decided I would head for that. I was walking very slowly like a cat burglar. I could feel the cold cement against my feet with every step, and it felt amazing. The feeling rippled through my legs and out of my fingers. I was one with the ground I was walking on, and I got to the fence and jumped over it with ease. I had the prowess of a tiger, and felt like I could do just about anything. I finally got to the forest and found a small clearing where I sat down cross-legged. I stared at the sky and the trees and felt the wind on my face. This is amazing. All my senses were boosted. Sight, smell, sound, touch, and taste. I cleared my mind and closed my eyes. I saw picture-perfect images of anything I wanted. I could think of something, and there it was. It was astonishing. I had never experienced anything like this before, and wanted to tell the world just how amazing it really was. I thought about running to my friend's house and waking him up to tell him about my experience, but quickly realised just how bad of an idea that really was. I then realised I had left a note to my family describing in great detail what I had done. Oh shit, I need to get home. I shouldn't be outside in my pyjamas with no shoes on in the fucking forest of all places. I jump up and run home. I don't know how long I spent in that forest, but it was starting to get light out now. I get home to find my mother there. She's read my letter and actually isn't reacting all that badly. She's mad, of course, that I left the house and tells me how stupid and dangerous it was to go out in such a state. But I'm honestly amazed that she isn't freaking out right now. Images of my childhood flash in my head. Me as a baby, as a child at the zoo, my mother caring for me. I'm flooded with these emotions and mostly the feeling of love. I tell my mum I love her and give her a big hug. The next 30 minutes or so is spent sitting on the couch talking to my mother. I'm ranting about how money isn't real and about how we just choose to believe in it, as well as time not being real either, it's all just an illusion. Everything in the world is love. We are all connected. We are all just a mass spirit system. Death is nothing. It was at this point my mum is starting to get freaked out. I thought our conversation was going great, but she's starting to see just how far gone I really am. My stepdad wakes up, and this is where it starts to get bad. He storms downstairs and my mum tells him what I've done. I can see it in his face. Pure disgust. I can see him judging me, wishing I wasn't around. I can hear it in his tone as he talks to me. It eats away at me like maggots on a corpse. I try to put it at the back of my mind, turn on the TV and flip through the channels. But at that moment, something switched in my mind. I unlocked something. Just like the TV changing channels, so could my mind. So that's what I did. I closed my eyes and flipped channels. I opened my eyes and I was somewhere else. It was unreal. I never even imagined this could happen. I had read and heard about people tripping and seeing full-on hallucinations, but thought they might be exaggerating. Nah, this was real. I was teleporting all around the world with the bat of an eyelash. While I was doing this, apparently my eyes had rolled back in my head and I'd fallen to the ground. I don't remember any of this. I was just teleporting to different places all over the world and having a wonderful time. I switched channels back to reality and see my mum holding me and singing Amazing Grace. This sort of chanting puts me into an almost shamanic trance. Her voice multiplied in my head and took over everything. I could hear a high-pitched chime in the background that got louder and louder and eventually broke my mind. It's really hard to explain, but that's honestly the best way I can describe it. Now, everything is quiet. My mum is saying things like, "Okay, just be quiet, you'll be alright." Try to be quiet, but something really isn't right. I have a feeling of pure anger and hatred inside of me. I'm seeing blown up babies, burnt women and children, chopped up people, rapes, wars. Everything bad in the world is coming at me right now. I can feel the pain of every human being on this planet. I'm reminded of what I learnt about Buddhism, the noble truth that life means suffering. I am overwhelmed at this point. I don't have my eyes open, and I don't remember much, but I'm told that I flung myself onto the table where I landed onto a drinking glass and smashed it. This really scares me because that honestly could have killed me. But luckily, I didn't get cut by the glass. This is really out of the ordinary because up until this point, I've never been out of control like this. Not even overly drunk. I'm usually very good at that. Well, my stepdad had had enough of this, and he phones the paramedics to come and get me. On the phone, I guess they heard me screaming in the background, and because of that, they had to bring the police as well. Well, I had no idea this was happening, so out of nowhere, a bunch of cops and paramedics walk in, and it's just the ultimate mindfuck in that moment. I cannot describe what I felt at this time. It was basically a confirmation that everything I was experiencing was just in my mind, because why else would a bunch of cops and paramedics be in my house? With this knowledge that it was all a dream and I was really not in any trouble at all, I felt fucking fantastic once again. Now it was all a game. I'd unlocked some sort of cheat code from my mind. They strapped me to the trolley and wheeled me out to the ambulance. I remember the ride in the trolley. It was unreal. I felt like I was dead. Like I was a corpse in a coffin being carried to their grave. Inside the ambulance, I was just fucking with them because I thought it wasn't real. I kept asking them where we were going. Obviously not the hospital because this was in my mind. In that moment, I was convinced we were going to Egypt, and I was so excited. I've always wanted to see Egypt. I told them all how amazing it was going to be, and how I couldn't wait till we got there. They played along, and told me we'd get there soon. Now I'm in the hospital, and I realise I have cuffs on. Not only that, but they are really tight and hurt. Quickly, I see that this is real, and I'm handcuffed, naked, and tied to a bed. What happened to me? I quickly changed my tone from happy-go-lucky to what the fuck is going on? The nurses don't pay much attention to me. They say the cuffs are for my safety. I plead with them and tell them how I would never hurt anyone, and this continues for quite a long time. They stick a urinary catheter in me, ouch, and pump something into my blood with an IV, which makes me feel like shit. I'm so tired, my muscles ache, and I can't even sleep. I'm also tripping really hard still. I can see waves of colour flowing across the hospital sheets and morphing on the walls. My mum and stepdad come to see me. They're really shaken and tell me what I've done. I'm extremely embarrassed and sorry that this happened. I'm told I have to talk to a psychologist before I'm allowed to leave. We talk and everything checks out. I then leave at 7 AM. I got absolutely no sleep that day and stayed up to eat dinner with the family. We don't tell anyone what happened. Only my mum and stepdad know. It hurts when I lift my arms. I have deep purple bruises all over them, as well as my neck, ribs, back and stomach. I have not touched any psychedelics since that experience, and doubt I will for a very long time. It really opened my eyes. I thought I knew what I was getting into, but I really didn't. I made lots and lots of mistakes that night. Number one being taking it the day I did. I was not in the right mindset, and it was almost 100% that it would turn into a bad trip. Second mistake was tripping alone. I think if I had a friend with me, this could have all been avoided. My parents didn't know about my drug use before this either. They thought I only smoked pot once a week. I told them I only took 2 hits of acid, and it was my first time doing it. I've only told one of my friends about this experience and don't plan on telling anyone else because, well, it's pretty embarrassing. I guess I'm just posting this because it's an interesting story. It's nice to get it off my chest and talk about it, you know. If you read this whole thing, and Bravo.